just happy, they got the deal done on his end. When my time comes, we'll be ready for those conversations as well.
Paul George has been one of the best players in the NBA for a long time now. A 9-time All-Star, 6-time All-NBA selection, and 4-time All-Defensive selection. He's long been regarded as a player who could move the needle for any team trying to contend. So much so that Brandon Miller even called Paul George his GOAT.
I grew up watching Paul George. It was never LeBron. I never knocked LeBron. LeBron is, definitely the best player in the league, but, I'm a Paul George fan, so of course, I thought I made it clear that my GOAT was Paul George, but, just to make it clear, my GOAT is Paul George.
And the Los Angeles Clippers surely felt this way about Paul George. In a late-night trade in 2019, the Clippers gave up a historic haul in order to bring Paul George to LA and pair him with Kawhi Leonard. The George Leonard era has had its ups and downs. The Clippers advanced to the conference finals for the first time ever in 2021. However, that season, like most of this era of Clippers basketball, included critical injuries that ravaged their chances at truly contending. Still, they've been a playoff team this season, buoyed by largely healthy seasons from George and Kawhi Leonard. The Clippers seem content to keep their franchise pillars together as they prepare to open their own arena next season. Leonard signed a massive 3-year extension in January, and George was expected to soon follow suit. But nearly 3 months later, he's yet to extend, raising questions about Paul George's future in LA. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop, like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. Now that we get all of that out of the way, cue the intro. Look right over here, you'll see all of these wonderful human beings that have been able to make some money by playing Prize Picks. And I give away my picks for free each and every day on my Instagram at TheFlightMike and Snapchat at FlightMikeSnap. And right now they're hooking up my subscribers fat when you use my promo code FlightMike when you sign up for Prize Picks. And thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mike Chuck 1212. What's going on, everybody? The Los Angeles Clippers knew that this season would be one of the more consequential years in recent team history, especially when considering the previous 2 seasons, which served as this era's low point. Kawhi Leonard missed the entire 2021 to 2022 season after undergoing surgery on his partially torn ACL that he suffered during the 2021 playoffs. Paul George only played in 31 games that season after dealing with a torn ligament in his elbow. The Clippers still managed to eke out a winning record with 42 victories, but lost 2 games in the play-in tournament and missed the playoffs for the first time since George and Leonard came to LA. Leonard returned the next season, but the 2022 to 2023 campaign ultimately served as yet another what if. The 2 stars each played in less than 60 games during the 2022 to 23 season, although George earned his 8th career All-Star nod. The LA Clippers raced up the standings with 44 wins and earned a playoff spot as the West's 5th seed. They'd face the newly formed Phoenix Suns in the first round, but at a significant disadvantage. George missed time late in the season with a right knee injury that ultimately kept him out for the entire series. Leonard dominated Game 1 with 38 points and a win, but they'd lose 4 straight and drop the series in 5 games. Without Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, who missed the final 3 games of the series with a torn meniscus, the Clippers stood virtually no chance of seriously competing in the playoffs. Going into the 2023 to 24 season, their injury statuses would be paramount for LA to monitor as always, with the team stating that each was fully healthy entering training camp. But it wasn't just health that the Clippers were monitoring ahead of the season. Leonard and George were entering the final guaranteed seasons of their identical extensions. Both of them held a player option that would allow either of them to enter free agency in 2024. The Los Angeles Clippers were facing a real possibility of another injury-riddled regular season or a stunted playoff run resulting in the departure of one or both franchise pillars. So the unsettled situation with their stars, both financially and physically, placed even more pressure on a critical Clippers season. Those overarching background factors likely contributed to the Clippers going all in and swinging for the fences early in the season. Just 3 games into the season, and LA acquired James Harden from the Philadelphia 76ers in a massive trade that instantly reshaped the Clippers roster. James Harden was the best player the team had acquired since bringing George and Leonard to LA. This was a major win now move meant to boost the Clippers in the immediate future. Instead, it quickly began to look like a disaster. LA lost the first 5 games with Harden in the lineup, and the team was in a free fall at 3-7. But after deciding to balance their starting lineup by bringing Russell Westbrook off of the bench in mid-November, the season started to change for the better. After finding their footing in the back half of November, the Clippers caught fire in early December, reeling off 9 straight wins to start the month. The streak was halted after back-to-back losses against the stout OKC Thunder and the Boston Celtics, but they wouldn't lose consecutive games again until late February. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George were healthy, and the Los Angeles Clippers kept up the barrage with 5 victories in a row. As they continued their elongated stretch of success into January, the Clippers checked off possibly the biggest item on their franchise to-do list that most significantly affected the team's future. And this move would change everything for the Clippers as a franchise. Kawhi Leonard signed a 3-year, $153 million extension, tying him to the Clippers until the 2027 offseason. Plus, he took a slightly lower salary than the maximum that he could have signed for. This was a huge development for the Clippers because they were locking up their best player, and this was big for the NBA since this killed Kawhi Leonard's potential 2024 free agency. However, the focus quickly shifted over to Paul George in the immediate aftermath of the extension's announcement, as Adrian Wojnarowski broke down how the contract itself and the league landscape would shape the negotiations on his possible extension.
There are some attractive teams who Paul George fits right into in free agency. Indiana with Tyrese Halliburton, potentially. Philadelphia with Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey. But he's going to have to take less than the max to stay in LA. Kawhi Leonard did. It is a negotiation. The negotiation will continue. But this is home for Paul George. This group, they're finally getting to see what this can look like. Harden has fit in perfectly. It is a negotiation. It's going to continue.
Later that day, after the LA Clippers earned their 21st win in 27 games, Kawhi Leonard addressed the extension in front of the media. Kawhi was asked about how George and Harden's upcoming free agencies factored into his decision, and he said something so casually that most people at the time missed how monumental it was.
For the most part, everybody is coming back. So with me signing an extension, I think it gives us a chance to sign both of those players.
Kawhi's offhand admission that he expects the team to re-sign both Paul George and James Harden should have sent shockwaves throughout the NBA, but it wasn't much of a surprise, especially after George himself stated his desire to stay in LA when asked about Kawhi's extension that night.
We'll see in my situation when we get there. But, again, just happy, they got the deal done on his end. I know he wants to stay here, myself as well. When my time comes, we'll be ready for those conversations as well.
After that night, the Clippers only lost 2 more games during January as they continued regularly rolling over teams by double digits. To start February, George and Leonard were named to the All-Star team together. The wins kept coming as the All-Star break drew near, but one thing that had yet to arrive was an extension for Paul George. With a month having gone by without a deal, George was asked after a game about the negotiations, and while he made his intentions clear, he also kept his answer short and sweet.
Anything changed? Is the goal for both sides still to kind of come to an agreement on an extension sometime soon?
That's the goal.
Well, is there any new update beyond just that?
That's the goal.
Even so, the Clippers entered the All-Star break having gone 33-10 after their horrific 3-7 start. LA's 2 All-Stars have continued to play at a high level while remaining healthy after the break, and they are well positioned to officially clinch a playoff berth. As of the making of this video, Paul George is on track to have the most efficient season of his career. He's shooting career-high percentages from the field, on 3-pointers, and even on free throws. Meanwhile, he's averaging over 22 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists on 1.5 steals per game. He recently had his first 40-point game of the season, dropping 41 points against the Charlotte Hornets as the Clippers won their 3rd game in a row for the first time since early February. But we're now in the final weeks of the regular season, and Paul George still doesn't have a new deal. His contract situation is just as unsettled now as it was at the beginning of the season. ESPN's Brian Windhorst recently stated that while George's return is the most widely expected result, there are some hurdles that the Clippers and other teams need to clear in order to reach a contract agreement.
It's now been 3 months, give or take, and there's been no agreement on Paul George, and the word in the NBA is that they're apart. That's not have a big problem, they're apart. I think the league believes that Paul George wants to remain a Clipper, and there would be concern in the league about recruiting Paul George, especially if you had to give away players to open up space. My informed speculation is that eventually Paul will agree to a deal with the Clippers. It may not be for the full max, but it may be for more than what the Clippers have been offering.
Since recovering from their horrible start with James Harden, the Los Angeles Clippers have largely been playing out their best case scenario all season long. George and Leonard have had healthy all-star seasons, and they continue to be the team's backbone. The Clippers are on track to win 50 games for the first time since they teamed up, and home court advantage in a playoff series for the first time in 3 years. How far they go into the playoffs is still to be determined. However, if they fail to re-sign Paul George and or James Harden, it would significantly hinder their ability to contend moving forward. Losing them for nothing in free agency would be even worse. For his part, Harden has said that he wants to sign a long-term contract in order to retire with the Clippers, although he said that multiple times about the other teams that he's played for. However, James Harden is not eligible to sign a new contract until after the NBA Finals. Paul George, on the other hand, is a much different story. Paul George can sign at any time, but there are a few factors that could be influencing his current impasse with the team. First off, George will turn 34 years old in early May. While he's still one of the league's best players, he's not the guy he was at his peak, and the odds of him playing this well with consistently high volume decrease as he ages. And while injuries have been an outsized factor, the Clippers still have yet to reach the NBA Finals under his and Leonard's stewardship. As Woj reported when Kawhi took less than the max, that essentially limited the contract that Paul George could sign, since the Clippers likely won't give a bigger contract to their second best player. At the same time, losing him for nothing would be a crippling blow considering everything they gave up to get him in 2019. And there are some legitimate suitors who are positioned to make an offer that could persuade him to leave the comforts of Southern California. The two teams most linked to George outside of the Clippers are the Indiana Pacers and the Philadelphia 76ers. Signing with the Pacers would be a cool story for George, who began his career and blossomed into a star in the Hoosier State. Plus, the chance to team up with Tyrese Halliburton would be an enticing possibility for a high-volume wing who knows how to play off of the ball. But the Clippers made a huge trade ahead of the deadline when they acquired Pascal Siakam from the Raptors. His expected extension will be massive, and while George could technically still join the team in the likely event Siakam resigns, it will probably have to come via sign and trade, which means Indiana would have to give up assets and a big contract to bring him back. The 76ers seem like a more realistic option financially, since their stable of impending free agents means they'll have oodles of cap space to work with this summer. That could allow the Sixers to sign Paul George without trading away any players, although they'd have to be comfortable letting most of their free agents walk. Ironically, the James Harden trade between Philly and LA helped the Sixers clear even more space for this summer. Paul George teaming up with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey would be an exciting trio that every opponent would have to take seriously when healthy. On the other hand, Paul George probably heard plenty about Philadelphia from James Harden, who publicly called Sixers team president Daryl Morey a liar, and signing him would significantly hinder Philly's ability to build a competitive roster around their big three, which includes the shaky injury histories of Paul George and Joel Embiid. There's even been whispers of a long shot bid for the league worst Detroit Pistons to swoop in and sign him to the contract he's looking for, but you have to be okay with joining a team that's far from contention, which would be an interesting decision for a veteran star who's in his mid-30s, who has yearned for a championship. Of course, George could be using these teams simply as potential leverage, as he and the team have publicly stated their desire to continue their partnership. It's just a matter of what the terms of a new deal look like. While Leonard is already locked up, the team could be waiting to see how they fare in the postseason before committing more money to George and Harden, players well into their 30s on an already expensive roster. How close the Clippers get to winning a championship will impact how smoothly a deal gets done in the coming months, but the longer Paul George goes without an extension, the more the league will wonder if he's truly available this summer.